"Don't look at me like that," the nun said. The mountain man kept staring. And then, he got a wife. The convent stood quietly at the edge of the mountains, where the land rose sharply and the air always felt colder than anywhere else. It was an old stone building, simple and strong, built long ago by people who believed silence could bring a person closer to peace. Tall pine trees surrounded it, and in winter, snow covered everything so completely that the world seemed to disappear. The nuns who lived there had chosen this place for that reason, far from noise, far from memory, far from the kind of life that left scars. She had lived there for 3 years. Before coming to the convent, her life had been full of pain she never spoke about. Loss, disappointment, and broken trust had followed her for too long. When she finally walked through the convent gates, wearing borrowed clothes and tired eyes, she believed she was leaving the world behind. She believed silence would heal her. The vows she later took were not made because she felt strong, but because she felt empty. Becoming a nun felt like the safest way to survive. Her days followed the same pattern. She woke before sunrise, prayed in the cold chapel, worked in the kitchen or garden, and kept her thoughts to herself. She was kind, obedient, and quiet. The other sisters respected her because she never complained. But at night, when the lights were out and the wind pushed against the stone walls, her mind did not stay quiet. Memories came without asking. She would press her hands together and whisper prayers, asking for strength she wasn't sure she truly had. That winter was harsher than usual. Snow fell early and stayed late. The small village below the mountains struggled to reach the convent, and supplies became a problem. The sisters could not carry heavy loads through deep snow, and the old road had become dangerous. That was when the village elders decided to send help from the mountains. The man arrived one gray morning. She heard him before she saw him. Heavy boots on frozen ground, the sound of wood shifting on a sled. When she stepped outside, the cold bit her face sharply and her breath turned white in the air. Then she noticed him standing near the gate. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in thick, worn clothes meant for mountain life. His beard was rough, his face weathered by wind and sun. He looked like someone who belonged to the wild, not to buildings made of prayer and rules. He lifted a crate from the sled as if it weighed nothing. Firewood, grain, and tools were stacked behind him. When he turned toward her, their eyes met. He did not mean to stare. It was not something he planned. But when he saw her, something stopped inside him. Her face was calm, almost pale against the dark fabric of her habit. Her eyes held a sadness that did not match her quiet posture. For a moment, the cold, the snow, and the heavy work all faded away. He just stood there looking. She felt it immediately. His gaze was not rude, but it was intense, like he was trying to understand something without words. Her heart jumped in a way it hadn't for years. She lowered her eyes quickly, feeling heat rise to her face even in the freezing air. "Don't look at me like that," she said softly. The words surprised both of them. He blinked as if waking from a dream. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, his voice low and rough. "I didn't mean any harm." She nodded, embarrassed by her own reaction. "It's all right," she said, though it didn't feel that way inside. Another sister came forward to greet him properly and thank him for bringing supplies. He returned to his work, unloading crates and stacking wood near the wall. But even as he focused on his task, his thoughts kept drifting back to her. He told himself it was nothing, just surprise, just curiosity. Yet every time she passed by, he felt the same strange pull. She tried to avoid him. As she moved between buildings, she kept her eyes low, reminding herself who she was and why she was there. She repeated prayers in her mind, forcing her thoughts back into safe paths. Still, she could feel his presence like warmth against cold skin. She hated herself for noticing. Later that day, she was assigned to help organize the supplies. The storeroom was narrow, and the air smelled of wood and grain. She worked silently, placing items on shelves when she sensed someone behind her. "I can carry those," he said gently. She turned, startled. He was standing too close, holding an empty crate. She stepped back quickly. "Thank you, but I can manage." He nodded and moved away, giving her space. "The snow's going to be heavy this year," he said, trying to sound casual. "You'll need more firewood." "We're grateful for the help," she replied, keeping her voice calm. Silence followed. He wanted to say more but didn't know how. Words had never come easily to him. Life in the mountains had taught him to listen more than speak. So he simply nodded and went back outside. That night she prayed longer than usual. She knelt in the chapel long after the others had left, the candles flickering softly. Her hands trembled as she pressed them together. She prayed for forgiveness, though she wasn't sure what she had done wrong. She prayed for distance. She prayed for strength. Yet in the quiet, his face kept returning to her mind, not as a temptation but as a question. Why had one look shaken her so deeply? Outside, the mountain man prepared to leave. He tightened the ropes on his sled and looked once more toward the convent. He told himself it was just another job, just another place. But something felt different. He felt like he was leaving something unfinished behind. As he walked away, snow began to fall again, soft and slow, covering the path between them. Neither of them knew it yet, but that brief moment, the look, the words, the silence, had already changed the direction of both their lives. After that day, life inside the convent returned to its quiet routine, but something small had shifted. The stone walls were the same, the prayers were the same, and the bells still rang at the same hours, yet her thoughts no longer stayed where she told them to. She blamed the winter at first. Long winters always made the days feel heavy. But deep inside, she knew the reason had a name and a face. She tried to forget him. During morning prayers, she focused harder on every word. While working in the kitchen, she kept her hands busy so her mind would not wander. She spoke less than usual, hoping silence would protect her again. But when she stepped outside and saw the mountain road below, her eyes searched it without her permission. A week passed, then another. The snow grew deeper and the village struggled even more to reach the convent. One afternoon, as the sisters were gathering firewood from the shed, the sound of boots on snow returned. Her heart reacted before her mind did. He was back. This time she stayed inside. From the window, she watched him unload wood and sacks of grain. His movements were steady and careful, like someone used to hard conditions. He worked without complaint, his breath rising in thick clouds. At one point, he stopped and looked toward the building, as if he felt her watching. She stepped back quickly, her heart racing. "Why does this bother me so much?" she asked herself. The Mother Superior asked her to bring warm water and bread for the visitor. Her hands shook slightly as she prepared the tray. She told herself it was just kindness, nothing more. Still, when she walked outside and handed it to him, her eyes met his again. This time he did not stare. He lowered his gaze respectfully. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome," she replied softly. There was a pause, gentle and awkward. "I'll be coming more often," he added. "The road isn't safe for the others," she nodded. "We appreciate it." He wanted to say something else, something he didn't understand himself, but the words stayed locked inside him. He took the tray and stepped away, giving her space. That small act of respect surprised her more than his stare ever had. As days turned into weeks, his visits became regular. He brought firewood, fixed broken steps, and repaired the old fence that kept animals away. Each time, he stayed polite and distant, careful not to make her uncomfortable. Yet the space between them felt full, like silence that carried weight. She noticed small things without meaning to. The way he wiped snow from his beard before speaking. The way his hands softened when he held fragile tools. The way his voice grew quieter when he spoke to her, as if the convent demanded gentleness. She did not like noticing these things. At night, she struggled more than before. Her prayers became questions. She asked herself why she had chosen this life. She remembered the pain that brought her here, the betrayal that made her afraid of the world. The convent had given her safety, but now she wondered if safety and peace were the same thing. The other sisters noticed the change. One older nun, kind and observant, watched her closely. One evening, while they folded laundry together, she spoke gently. "You seem troubled lately." "I'm fine," she replied too quickly. The older nun smiled softly. "Sometimes being fine is harder than being honest." She said nothing, afraid that if she spoke, too much would come out. Meanwhile, the mountain man found himself changing as well. He had lived alone for years, comfortable with silence and distance. The mountains had been enough for him. Yet now, each time he walked toward the convent, his steps felt lighter and his thoughts louder. He did not tell himself it was affection. He told himself it was respect, curiosity, concern. But when storms hit, he worried about her safety more than his own. When days passed without seeing her, something felt missing. One afternoon, a heavy snowfall trapped him near the convent. The road back became too dangerous, and the Mother Superior offered him shelter in the outer guest room. The decision was practical, not emotional, but it filled her with quiet panic. That evening, she avoided common spaces, keeping to her duties. She could hear his footsteps in the hall, slow and careful. Every sound made her aware of his presence. Later, as she carried a bucket of water, she slipped on the icy steps. Before she could fall, strong hands caught her arms. She gasped, startled more by the closeness than the slip. "I've got you," he said quickly, then released her at once. "I'm fine," she said, steadying herself, her heart pounding. They stood there for a moment, too close, too aware. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to." "I know," she interrupted gently. "Thank you." That night, sleep did not come easily to either of them. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind. She thought about how safe she had felt in his hands, and the thought frightened her. She pressed her palms together and prayed again, not for distance this time, but for understanding. He sat by the small window in his room, watching snow fall. He told himself he would leave at first light. Staying longer felt dangerous in a way he couldn't explain. Yet he also knew something important was happening, something neither of them could ignore forever. By morning, the storm had passed, but the silence between them felt heavier than snow. When he left, they exchanged only a brief look, filled with words they could not say. Both of them understood one thing clearly now. What had started with a single look was no longer a passing moment. It was a quiet pull, growing stronger, asking questions neither of them was ready to answer. The days after the storm felt different, as if the mountains themselves were holding their breath. Snow still covered the ground, but the sky often stayed clear, bright and cold. Inside the convent, the routine continued, yet her heart no longer followed it so easily. Every prayer felt heavier, every silence louder. She tried to return to the certainty she once had. She told herself that feelings were temporary and that discipline would win in the end. But each time she closed her eyes, his calm voice and steady presence returned to her thoughts. She did not feel temptation in a simple way. What troubled her most was the sense of being understood without words. One afternoon, the Mother Superior asked her to help organize old records in a small storage room. The task was meant to keep her busy and grounded. As she worked, she found an old journal left behind by a nun who had lived there long ago. The pages spoke of doubt, fear, and faith that had grown through honesty rather than denial. The words struck her deeply. For the first time, she wondered if doubt itself was not a failure, but a step toward truth. That same day, the mountain man arrived again, this time to fix a section of the roof damaged by ice. She watched from a distance as he worked carefully, his movements slow and deliberate. When their eyes met, there was no surprise now, only recognition. Later, while carrying tools back to the shed, he spoke quietly. "May I ask you something?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Are you happy here?" The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in years. She opened her mouth to answer quickly to give the safe reply, but the words would not come. "I'm grateful," she said finally. He nodded as if he understood more than she had said. "Gratitude is important," he replied, "but it's not the same thing." His honesty unsettled her. After he left, she felt restless, unable to settle into prayer or work. That night she dreamed of standing at a crossroads, one path leading back into the stone walls, the other into the open mountains. Meanwhile, he struggled with his own thoughts. He had lived a life shaped by survival, not reflection. He had never questioned where he belonged. Yet now he wondered if a life alone was truly what he wanted, or simply what he had accepted. A few days later, another storm approached faster than expected. The wind rose sharply, and snow fell thick and fast. He arrived early, knowing the road would soon become impossible. This time, the Mother Superior insisted he stay inside before conditions worsened. That evening, the convent felt unusually tense. The sisters moved quietly, aware of the situation but trusting in boundaries. She kept her distance, yet fate seemed determined to bring them into the same space. While carrying supplies to the cellar, a shelf collapsed, sending tools and jars crashing to the floor. She froze, overwhelmed by the noise and mess. He rushed in immediately. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head, though her hands trembled. Together they cleaned the mess in silence. When the room was finally still, she spoke without planning to. "I didn't come here because I was strong," she said softly. He paused but did not interrupt. "I came because I was afraid," she continued. "Afraid of being hurt again, afraid of choosing wrong." He looked at her, his expression gentle. "Running from pain doesn't always bring peace," he said. "Sometimes it just changes the shape of it." Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not cry. "I don't know who I am without these walls," she admitted. He nodded. "And I don't know who I'd be with someone else in my life," he said honestly. They stood there, sharing a truth that felt both frightening and freeing. No promises were made. No lines were crossed. Yet something shifted deeply between them. That night she asked to speak with the Mother Superior. Sitting across from her in the small office, she finally allowed herself to speak openly. She admitted her doubts, her fear, and her confusion. The older woman listened carefully. "Faith is not proven by hiding from life," the Mother Superior said gently. "It is proven by facing it honestly." Those words stayed with her. By morning the storm had eased, but the decision she faced had grown clearer. She knew she could not continue living between two truths. Something had to change. When he left later that day, she walked him to the gate. Snow crunched beneath their feet. "I don't know what will happen," she said quietly, "but I can't pretend anymore." He met her gaze, steady and respectful. "Whatever you choose," he said, "make sure it's truly yours." As he disappeared down the mountain path, she felt fear, relief, and sadness all at once. For the first time since arriving at the convent, she was not running from those feelings. She was facing them. The morning she made her decision did not feel dramatic. There were no signs in the sky, no sudden peace in her heart. Instead, there was a quiet heaviness, like the moment before a deep breath. She woke before the bell, sat on the edge of her bed, and looked at her folded habit resting on the chair. For years, that cloth had been her shield. Now it felt like a question she could no longer avoid. She went through her morning prayers with the others, her voice steady even though her hands trembled. Each familiar word felt different, not weaker, but more honest. When the prayers ended, she stayed seated while the others rose. The Mother Superior noticed and gave her a small nod, as if to say, "When you are ready." Later that morning, she asked for permission to speak again. They sat together in the small office where sunlight fell through a narrow window. Dust floated in the air, slow and calm. "I need to leave," she said quietly. The words did not break her. They did not break the room. They simply existed. The Mother Superior did not look surprised. "For how long?" she asked gently. "I don't know," she answered. "Maybe forever. Maybe just until I understand who I am without fear." There was a long silence. Then the older woman reached across the table and took her hand. "Leaving does not erase what you learned here," she said, "and staying does not guarantee peace. You must choose truth over safety." Tears finally came, but they were soft, not painful. When she left the room, she felt lighter and more afraid at the same time. Word spread quietly. There were no harsh reactions, only mixed looks of sadness, concern, and quiet support. One sister hugged her tightly. Another pressed a small wooden cross into her palm. No one judged her openly, but she felt the weight of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. Packing took little time. She owned almost nothing: a few clothes, a book, and the cross. When she folded her habit for the last time, her hands paused. She did not hate it. She thanked it silently for protecting her when she needed protection most. When she stepped outside the convent gates, the cold air touched her face like a challenge. The mountain stood tall and open, no walls, no rules, just space. She did not know where she would go, only that she could not turn back. The mountain man did not come immediately. Days passed. She stayed in the village below, working small jobs, helping where she could. Life outside was louder, messier, and far less predictable. People asked questions she did not know how to answer. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with quiet judgment. At night she lay awake on a borrowed bed, listening to unfamiliar sounds, missing the steady rhythm of convent life. Doubt returned often. What if I was wrong? What if fear followed me here too? But each morning she woke with a small sense of strength she had not felt before. She made choices, even simple ones, and those choices felt real. When he finally came down from the mountains, he did not expect to see her in the village market. She was carrying a basket, her hair covered with a simple scarf, her face more open than before. When their eyes met, surprise crossed his face, followed by careful concern. "You left," he said quietly. "Yes," she replied. They stood there, unsure of what came next. There was no sudden closeness, no dramatic moment. Just two people standing in a new place without the rules that once defined them. "I didn't come looking for you," he said honestly. "I thought you needed space." "I did," she answered. "I still do, but I'm glad you're here." They walked together through the village, speaking slowly, carefully. She told him about her doubts, her fears, and the difficulty of starting over. He told her about the mountains, about loneliness that felt easier than risk, and about how strange it was to care for someone without knowing what to do with that care. He did not offer to rescue her. She did not ask him to. Instead, they helped each other in small ways. He fixed a broken door where she stayed. She listened when he spoke about things he had never shared with anyone. Trust grew not through promises but through time. Life was not kind all at once. Money was tight. Work was hard. Some nights she cried quietly, missing the certainty she once had. Other nights she felt proud of herself for surviving another day. He watched her struggle with admiration, not pity. She watched him soften in ways he did not notice. People began to talk. Some whispered about the former nun and the mountain man. Some expected a quick ending, a mistake. Others simply watched, waiting to see what would happen. She felt the pressure but refused to let it decide for her. One evening after a long day they sat outside, watching the sky turn dark. The mountains looked different from here, still strong but less distant. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not of you, of choosing again," he nodded. "I've been scared my whole life," he said. "I just learned to live quietly with it." She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not a man who stared, but a man who waited, who respected her strength even when she doubted it herself. That night, for the first time, she slept without regret. She did not know what the future held. Marriage was not a promise yet. Love was not a declaration. But something honest was growing, something built not on escape or fear but on choice. And for the first time that felt enough. Time moved forward quietly, not with big changes, but with many small ones that slowly shaped their lives. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Each morning, she woke with a mix of fear and determination, but the fear no longer controlled her. She was learning how to live without hiding, and that alone felt like progress. She found steady work helping an older woman who ran a small guest house on the edge of the village. The work was simple, cleaning rooms, preparing meals, welcoming travelers, but it gave her something important: purpose. People spoke to her not as a symbol or a question, but as a person. She learned how to smile without guilt and how to speak honestly without fear of punishment. The mountain man continued his work in the hills, but now he came down more often. Sometimes he brought firewood for the guest house. Sometimes he just came to check on her. He never acted as if he owned her future or expected anything from her. That patience made her trust him more than words ever could. They spent time together in quiet ways, walking through the village, sitting near the river, sharing meals without rushing. There were moments of silence, but they were no longer uncomfortable. Silence became a place where both felt safe. She slowly began to change. Her shoulders no longer stayed tense. Her voice grew stronger. She laughed sometimes, surprising herself when it happened. She still prayed, but her prayers were different now. They were not requests to disappear or to be protected from life. They were honest words of thanks and guidance, spoken without fear. There were difficult moments too. Some villagers still judged her. A few asked sharp questions about her past. Others whispered when she walked by. On those days, doubt returned, heavy and familiar. She wondered if she had made a mistake, if leaving the convent had only exchanged one kind of pain for another. On one such day, she broke down quietly behind the guest house. He found her there sitting on a wooden step, tears running down her face. "I don't know if I'm strong enough for this," she said. He sat beside her, not touching her at first. "You already are," he replied. "You just don't see it yet." She looked at him then, really looked at him. He was still rough around the edges, still shaped by the mountains. But there was kindness in his eyes, and respect in the way he waited for her to stand on her own. That was the moment she realized something important. She was not being saved, she was being supported. As spring arrived, the snow melted from the mountain paths. Flowers appeared along the road, small and stubborn. Life felt lighter. She felt lighter. One evening, after a long walk, they sat together watching the sun sink behind the hills. The sky was painted in soft colors, calm and wide. "I never planned on this," she said quietly. "Neither did I," he answered. She took a deep breath. "But I don't regret it." He turned toward her, surprised but steady. "Neither do I." That was not a promise. It was something better. It was truth. Their relationship grew naturally after that. There was no sudden change, no rush. They learned each other's habits, fears, and hopes. They argued sometimes, but they listened more than they spoke. Trust grew slowly, like roots beneath the soil. 1 year after she left the convent, he asked her to walk with him into the mountains. They climbed a familiar path until they reached a quiet clearing overlooking the valley. The air was fresh, and the world below looked small and distant. "This is where I come when I need to think," he said. She stood beside him, calm and sure. "I'm glad you brought me here." He hesitated, then spoke carefully. "I don't know how to say things the right way, but I know I don't want to walk alone anymore." Her heart beat fast, but there was no fear this time. "I don't want to hide anymore," she replied. They stood there together, the mountains around them, not as a place of escape, but as a shared home. They married quietly. There was no large ceremony, no grand celebration. Just a few people who cared, a simple promise, and a shared understanding. She did not feel like she was losing something sacred. She felt like she was honoring it in a new way. When he looked at her now, she no longer flinched. She met his gaze with confidence. Life as a wife was not perfect. There were hard days, misunderstandings, and moments of doubt. But there was also laughter, shared work, and comfort. She learned how to build a home. He learned how to share space. Together, they learned how to grow. Sometimes she returned to the convent to visit. She walked through the old stone halls with gratitude, not regret. The sisters welcomed her kindly. She was no longer running from that life or longing for it. It was simply part of her story. One evening, sitting beside her husband, watching the mountains fade into night, she thought back to the day she first saw him, the stare that had shaken her, the words she had spoken in fear. "Don't look at me like that." She smiled now. That look had not been judgment or desire alone. It had been recognition, a moment when two lives, both shaped by solitude, had quietly found each other. She had not lost her faith. She had not lost herself. She had found a life built on choice, honesty, and courage. And that was how the mountain man who once stared in silence ended up with a wife. Not by taking her, not by changing her, but by waiting while she chose herself first.